I arrived at Columbia University in the city of New York as an undergraduate student in 1999, and the very first person I met there was a young woman named Ariana. We were standing in front of the elevators, waiting to bring some things up to our dorm room, so in the interest of polite conversation, Ariana asked me, "What did you do over your summer?" I was like, "Oh, I spent my summer taking care of my special needs baby sister, Olivia, so that both of my parents could work full time." "What did you do over your summer, Ariana?" She said, "Oh, I spent my summer traveling across Southeast Asia as a classically trained oboe player with the New York International Youth Philharmonic." And it was at that moment, approximately 38 seconds into my college career, that I felt like a total and complete fraud, and like I had absolutely no right to be where I was. Not because of anything Ariana said or did. She did nothing wrong, just because. Because what right did a person like me have speaking to, let alone going to college, with a classically trained oboe protege who had spent her entire summer traveling the world sharing the gift of her talent? I don't know about you, but I'm what happens when a railroad worker meets a cocktail waitress at a country western bar off the Long Island Expressway called Matty T's. My parents were good, hardworking people, but nobody was learning to play oboe in my house. Come to think of it, I'm not even sure we knew what an oboe was in my house. And I'm what happens when those two people have a baby and in search of a warmer life, they move to Florida so he can grow up in a rural community to raise chickens and Nubian dairy goats and grow radishes for the county fair and give ducklings swimming lessons in the wheelbarrow. It was a good, wholesome way to grow up, but it did absolutely nothing to prepare me for that conversation in front of the elevators, and it did even less to prepare me for my first class in college. Literature Humanities, a great books course. We were assigned Homer's Iliad to read. I read it twice over the summer just to be extra prepared. And we get to class on the first day, and the professor's like, "What did you think of the text?" And before I can so much as part my lips, the kid next to me shoots his hair in the air, and he announces to the class that he takes issue with the English translation of the ancient Greek that we had been assigned because he found the translation a bit pedestrian. And the kid across the table goes, "Oh, thank God someone said it." Oh, thank God someone said it. Meanwhile, I'm over here awkward as hell being like, "I liked the book." Don't worry, though, I did what any self-respecting person would do to process my embarrassment, and after class I found some bushes and I hid behind them and I cried. Luckily, my professor was an observant and empathetic person. He noticed I was withdrawn the first few classes and he invited me to his office hours where I decided to be honest with him about the fact that I felt like I didn't belong, about the fact that I felt both invisible and conspicuous at the same time, all the time, about the fact that I felt like maybe this whole college thing just wasn't really for someone like me, despite being surrounded on all sides by caring faculty and administrators who kept on telling me that I did belong. It just felt like every conversation I overheard and every social and cultural fact I encountered were all crowding around me and whispering to me in unison, "You do not belong here." And that was me, by the way. That was me, a white, cisgender, at that time closeted gay male. I can't even imagine what it must have been like for some of my classmates, especially my classmates of color. Those whispers that I were hearing, "You do not belong here. You do not deserve this. Places like this aren't for people like you." Those whispers must have sounded like cannon fire to them. Fast forward almost 25 years, I'm happily back at my alma mater, serving as the Director of Education for the Columbia University Center for Veteran Transition and Integration. We are a force multiplier organization that works with colleges, universities, employers, and veteran service organizations to build more inclusive culture for veterans of the United States Armed Forces. And you won't be surprised to hear that one of the most significant challenges that veterans face as they exit military service and enter higher education and workforce settings is feeling like they don't belong. Feeling both invisible and conspicuous at the same time, all the time. Feeling like the opportunities that they have earned somehow aren't really for people like them. You may have heard this thing referred to as imposter syndrome. I prefer the slightly less pathological imposter phenomenon, which conveniently is the name that the idea's creators originally gave it before the collective force of culture rebranded it a syndrome. The experience of feeling like you don't belong, despite evidence that you are welcome and deserving and worthy. Now, in my career, I have had the pleasure and the privilege to work with literally thousands of veterans and military-connected students, first-generation college students, students from low-income backgrounds, students from historically marginalized communities, and non-traditionally aged students. And let me tell you that for many of these students, imposter feelings are not some idea. They are a fact of everyday life. And in working with these populations, I've identified 5 hallmarks of imposter phenomenon, and if you yourself have ever experienced imposter feelings, then you may already be familiar with one, or some, or even all of them. So if you have the courage, as I list them, please raise your hands if any of these resonate with you even a little bit. Number 1, a tendency towards self-undervaluation. Number 2, sometimes feeling out of place or self-conscious in your surroundings. 3, a persistent, often internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. 4, a willingness to refuse or ignore the value of your own accomplishments and achievements. And number 5, my favorite, a tendency to attribute your success to external factors such as luck or timing or team, rather than internal factors such as work ethic, experience, talent, or skill. And this is not an exhaustive list, but these are the big hitter feelings that my imposters, as I lovingly refer to them, report battling with most often. But here's the thing about imposter phenomenon, ladies and gentlemen. If you experience it, you're not just up against the feelings themselves, you're also up against an entire mainstream way of thinking about and talking about this thing that works to pathologize and victimize and gaslight the feeler. Do a simple Google search for imposter phenomenon, and look at the kind of language that swirls around this concept. How I beat my imposter syndrome, how I cured my imposter syndrome, symptoms of and treatments for imposter syndrome. Everywhere we look, we see this thing described either as a psychological impediment that needs to be managed or mitigated or treated or cured, or as a character flaw, an inherent weakness, a negative personality trait, a personal or professional liability. Indeed, so fierce is our fight against these feelings, so desperate is our need to defend ourselves from these toxic and debilitating sensations that you'll even see military metaphors peppered throughout the self-helposphere that surrounds this concept. 5 types of imposter syndrome and how to battle each one. 3 tactics to defeat imposter syndrome. And what do you think might be the cumulative effect of all of this pathologizing and militarized and fraught language? Well, for starters, it locates the problem inside the feeler. And it suggests quite explicitly that if you're a person who experiences imposter feelings, you are somehow broken, and it is incumbent upon you to take the necessary steps to mend that brokenness. This is how cultural gaslighting works. Convince a person or a population that they have a problem, then convince them that the problem is theirs to solve. I can think of no better, more efficient way to keep people marginalized than to demand that they defend themselves from shadows. Now, I want to pause here briefly, both to acknowledge and to express my gratitude for the fact that not everyone is speaking about imposter phenomenon in this way. In the past couple of years, there have been some bold thinkers who have attempted to disrupt the dominant discourse on imposter phenomenon, most productively by resurrecting the concept's true origin story, by shedding light on the critical role that institutions play in creating and perpetuating imposter culture, and by highlighting the outsized and damaging effects that the imposter narrative has had on women, on people of color, and especially on women of color. These contributions have added vital nuance to a discussion that for far too long has ignored the fact that sociocultural phenomena like imposter syndrome create winners and losers, and the costs of losing are very real. I myself have witnessed students, promising, profoundly talented students, experience academic distress, struggle with anxiety and depression, even drop out of college altogether, not because they weren't smart enough, not because they didn't work hard enough, not because they couldn't afford it, but because of their own deep-seated belief that they never deserved college in the first place. but I've also witnessed something else. Something not a lot of people are talking about, something absolutely thrilling, and something that has changed forever my understanding of this thing we irresponsibly call imposter syndrome. And what I'm about to say is not an exaggeration. In my career, in every single case that a student has reported to me experiencing imposter feelings, what they also always were already doing is engaging in a moment of aspiration, a moment of striving, a moment of pushing themselves outside their comfort zone, trying something new, taking a risk, growing. Think about it. Think about the times when you yourself have experienced imposter feelings. When are you more likely to feel like a fraud? When you're on the couch at home with the rescue beagle? Or when you're at a meeting with senior colleagues in a new professional role? When are you more likely to feel like you don't quite fit in? When you're hanging out with friends you've known from high school, or when you're trying to make new friends at work or at school? And in which situation are you more likely to struggle with a little bit of insecurity about whether or not you have what it takes to accomplish a goal? When you're doing something you've done 1,000 times, like making a cup of coffee or riding a bicycle, or when you're doing something new for the very first time, like, I don't know, giving a TEDx talk. Here's the truth, folks. Everywhere we look, we see this thing described as either a psychological or moral failing that requires immediate reparative action. But what if? What if imposter phenomenon is just the thing that happens when you engaged in the hard work of transforming your life? What if imposter phenomenon is the thing that happens when you are changing the very DNA of your professional and personal world? What if it wasn't that Columbia University wasn't for a person like me? What if I just felt a little out of place at the beginning because, wait for it, I was a little out of place at the beginning? What if all of our imposter feelings that we're all supposed to eradicate and cure in 5 simple steps are just the organic and natural byproduct of pushing ourselves and challenging ourselves? And what if the discomfort associated with that is actually a sign that we're doing something right, not doing something wrong? What if it's... What if it's not about being broken at all? What if it's about becoming something new? If you can't tell, I've put my arms, my short little arms, all the way around the word imposter as a favorite self-descriptor. You'll see it in my LinkedIn profile. And I'm working hard every single day to help mitigate the stigma associated with these feelings, and I'm trying to evangelize people to a new way of thinking about this old and destructive concept, because I have to tell you folks, we've been lied to. It was never the imposter feelings that were harming us. It was the lie, the belief that those feelings are somehow bad or broken, or worse, we are somehow bad or broken for feeling them, that was harming us. I think back on my students who experience imposter phenomenon, and all I see is a group of students who are high-achieving, maintain exacting self-performance standards, are generous of ethic and spirit, quick to promote team over self, alert, adept readers of the environment, hungry for feedback, and willing to grow. I've also noticed that all those hallmarks of imposter phenomenon look a whole lot like hallmarks of other things, like humility and servant leadership. My imposters, my unassuming, unentitled change makers who willfully remove themselves from their comfort zone in search of betterment for themselves, their families, and their communities. Ladies and gentlemen, these people are society's answer to the narcissist. You want them on your teams, you want them coaching your kids on the soccer field, you want them holding public office, you want them gathered around your Thanksgiving table, and if you're super lucky, you might even get to marry one of them. So the next time someone tells you, you have imposter syndrome, or the next time you yourself experience an imposter feeling, I want you to smile a big, fat smile. You know why? Because that feeling is proof that you're trying, that you're growing, and that you're becoming something new. How I beat my imposter syndrome, let me fix that for you. How I became an imposter. Thank you so much.